What's up, guys? I'm Steve. Before I get into it, I tried recording this once already, and I kept stuttering and stuttering. I had dinner. Maybe that'll help with my stuttering. Getting into this video, this is going to be about some potentially overlooked waiver wire pickups for Week 12. So if these guys are out there on the waiver wire still, hey, maybe go give them a gander. Starting with Cam Akers of the Los Angeles Rams. So he's only rostered in 27% of Yahoo leagues. No more Darrell Henderson, so that should naturally open up more opportunities for Cam Akers. In Week 11, Cam Akers had 14 rushes for 61 rushing yards, 4.4 yards a carry. Not too bad. No targets, unfortunately, but I'm sure that's going to change going forward with, again, no Darrell Henderson. He's not a flashy pickup by any means, and the man did just finally get out of Sean McAvay's doghouse. He was a trade cancer throughout before the trade deadline. He wasn't able to get traded. So I would keep that in mind, for his role, his potential role moving forward. And I'd keep in mind, too, just how bad the Rams offense and the Rams offensive line is as a whole. They're not looking good. The only good thing that he has going for him in the Rams as a whole is their upcoming schedule towards running backs is very favorable. So if you need a running back, you could certainly take a flyer on him. To a smaller extent, Kyron Williams, he is out there, only owned at 27% of leagues. We don't know how this backfield's going to unfold now with no Darrell Henderson. So if you got a spot, pick him up as a stash, and we can just see where the backfield goes from here. So next on this list, we got we have Jerick McKinnon of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's only rostered in 26% of Yahoo leagues. It looks like he has the passing work down for the most part. And with Clyde Edwards-Helaire now dealing with a high ankle sprain, not that he was really cutting into his work much anyway. His role should naturally increase a little bit. The previous two games before this game, he had 8 targets in each of those games. So the usage is there for him. And again, he should see a slight uptick in his usage. He had the bad game this week, but he is playing with Patrick Mahomes and this very high-powered Chiefs offense. For me, that's more than enough to have me convinced on taking a flyer on Jerick McKinnon. So now we're going to jump to some wide receivers here. First on my list, I got Nico Collins. He's only rostered in 27% of Yahoo leagues. Nico Collins, he seems to have supplanted Brandon Cooks as the number 1 wide receiver for these Houston Texans. Over the last 2 games, he's had a 24% target share. His next 2 games are pretty favorable for wide receivers. If you're desperate at wide receiver and Nico Collins is on your waiver wire, the next 2 games at least, I feel he's going to provide some decent wide receiver 3 and or flex appeal for you there. The next wide receiver here we have is Kendall Hinton. The quarterback turned wide receiver turned whatever you need him for. So long as Jerry Jeudy stays out, Kendall Hinton I think he's going to be a pretty viable option for you as long as Jerry Jeudy is out. I'm going to stress that. Jerry Jeudy needs to be out for Kendall Hinton to be viable at all. The Denver Broncos schedule is very favorable towards wide receivers the rest of the year. To go along with Jeudy being banged up, KJ Hamler is hurt. The backfield is a mess. The Broncos need playmakers, and they need playmakers to step up. Kendall Hinton, he nearly hauled in that long touchdown before being rolled out at the 2-yard line there. These last 2 games, he's had at least 57 receiving yards, and with this schedule and no Jerry Jeudy, there was certainly plenty of upside for him to produce and be a viable fantasy starter until Jerry Jeudy returns. This next guy, I'm not going to lie, he was not on my list originally. Then I heard of the QB change. Then I put him on the list. So we are, of course, talking about Elijah Moore of the New York Jets. This one is very interesting. New York Jets head coach Robert Saleh, he came out today in his press conference and he says Zach Wilson is being benched. He's going to be a healthy scratch this week. Mike White is going to be starting under center with Joe Flacco backing him up. Okay, fine. Mike White will be making his first start in Week 12 since Week 7 of the 2021 campaign. He started 4 games in that season in 2021, Week 7, 8, 9, and 10. So, in those 4 games with Mike White, Elijah Moore Elijah Moore was averaging over 6 targets a game. He had 6 targets in 3 of those games, 8 targets in the fourth. Elijah Moore had 17 total catches in those 14 games. In 14 games. In those 4 games with Mike White, he had 17 catches. He was averaging 63 receiving yards in those 4 games with Mike White. He had 3 TDs over those 4 games with Mike White in that 4-game stretch from week 7 to 10. From week 7 to 10 of the 2021 season with Mike White under center, Elijah Mitchell finished as the wide receiver 30 in week 7, the wide receiver 32 in week 8, the wide receiver 1 in week 9, and wide receiver 21 in week 10. Not bad at all. Now, with all that being said, Elijah Moore has, well, more or less been phased out of this offense. I'm not sure if that's a coaching thing or if Zach Wilson is just that bad. I'll bank on Zach Wilson just being that bad. But from a fantasy football perspective on Elijah Moore, this was probably the best thing to happen since sliced bread for him. So we don't know how this is all going to pan out ultimately, but with the stats he has with Mike White, it is certainly encouraging, having Mike White as the starter now. He's only owned in 25% of Yahoo leagues, and before his potential rise from the dead game, go grab him now, just in case he starts, having some of that success he previously did last year. So now we're going to jump to a tight end here, Foster Moreau. I talked about him in my previous Week 12 waiver wire video. He's only 40% rostered. He has a great matchup this week against the Seattle Seahawks, giving up the second most fantasy points to tight ends. He's playing all the snaps, and until Darren Waller returns, that's just how it's going to be. So he certainly has that top 12 upside, just simply because he's on the field every play. So we're going to jump to another tight end here, Evan Ingram. He is currently the tight end 17 on a fantasy per points basis. Fantasy points per game basis. I told you I was stuttering. I don't know what's going on. But he is the tight end 17 on a fantasy points per game basis, which is probably why he's only rostered in 36% of leagues, Evan Ingram. Which, personally I feel is kind of high. But, look, these Jags, they got great matchups for tight ends coming up. Baltimore Ravens, they're allowing the 4th highest catch rate for tight ends. After the Baltimore Ravens, they play the Detroit Lions, who allows the 5th highest catch rate to tight ends. So certainly some favorable matchups for Evan Ingram if you need a streamer for the next couple weeks. And quickly, I'm going to go over a quarterback here. Matt Ryan. Monday night, prime time, Lucas Oil Stadium. Matt Ryan throws a game-winning 70-yard TD, and you win your fantasy matchup. Now, I'm sure you don't want your win or your loss coming down to a Matt Ryan 70-yard TD. But he does have a solid streaming matchup against these Pittsburgh Steelers this week, who are allowing 387 yards of total offense a game, allowing an average of 272 pass yards a game, a 61% completion percentage to opposing QBs. Matt Ryan, he certainly isn't what he used to be, but he certainly has the potential to just dissect this defense. But I think that's all I have for today. I appreciate you guys watching. And let me know how I'm doing here. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.